profit versus growth. As the year comes to an end, you're going to start looking at your bottom line and trying to figure out how much money did I make in 2020? And how much money should I reinvest into my business? Where should I try and focus for growth? And how do I measure this friction that happens between profit and growth? Today, we're going to talk with the CEO of Seller Accountant, Tyler Jefcoat. He is the number one place I send any accounting or CFO external needs. I highly recommend his business. I've known him and worked closely with Tyler for 3 years. This is not the first time we've had him on our podcast as well. So with that, I think this is a treat. I think this is a great podcast that talks about the differences and the strategy all behind profit and growth. This is the My Amazon Guy podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pope, founder of the agency My Amazon Guy. Tune in each week to learn how to grow your Amazon sales. I'm now joined by Tyler Jefcoat. Thanks for coming on the My Amazon Guy podcast.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So today we're talking growth versus profit, and you're the numbers man. You know what the ROI looks like after all is said and done.
Well, I love talking about growth and the profit. I think the biggest mistake I made in my first company, Stephen, and you and I have laughed about this before, but you can get so focused on growth that you never make any money, right? And so we got 2.5 years into a 100+ employee company that I started in 2012, and we're not making money every month, and it's because we didn't know how to manage profitability. And so needless to say, I'm really passionate about that. It's important. It's important to make sure you build margin in and not sacrifice your life, just to grow if you're not going to actually keep any margin.
And this year was obviously a crazy year for a variety of reasons. And I think for those that survived the supply chain woes, it was actually probably a more profitable year for most, but also never been more difficult to run. So before we go into like some real examples, let's just talk about that friction between profit and growth. Like why do these two things have friction in your opinion?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's friction there because there's two reasons. One would be just a pricing reason. So whether they, spend too much on advertising or lower their price just to move products. So that's kind of the obvious. Everyone thinks about, sacrificing profit by, but I'm moving $1 million a month, and yes, but you're losing money, right? Yes, it's costing you $1.1 million a month to actually, send those products out. And so I think that's the classic trading your profit for volume. But I think the other thing that's missing here is the inventory risk is so huge for these brand owners that a lot of times I can tie up all of my cash, all of my working capital tied up in inventory, and it sits in a warehouse for a year, 18 months, and never sells. And so even though I make money, I ultimately sell the unit and I made a few points, I had to borrow that money for a year and a half in order to get that done. That's not good either. So that's the other part that we see a lot in our practice is that sellers will say, well, yeah, I made 20% profit after ads. I'm like, that's great, but you sat on the inventory for a year and a half. And as a result, I wish you had done something different and could have turned that same cash over and over and over again. So you would have been more profitable.
That inventory cash turnover, I think, is not a very highly discussed topic when it comes to selling on Amazon. And one of the IPI numbers that kind of came out over the last year was that actual metric, which was inventory turn. And so for those that have inventory that's stale, it's sitting there, you're paying storage fees. But I think the comment you made, though, about how you could have turned it more if you invested it elsewhere was probably the most enlightening part, right? Like prioritization and focus on like where you put money matters, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as we go into next year, where would you focus your money? Like, I personally, I think supply chain, just-in-time supply chain is dead. Like, I think that black swan, maybe it'll come back in a year or two. I don't know. But so I think being invested heavily in inventory makes sense from that perspective, right? Because you don't know like where the next big rush is going to come. And if you don't have the inventory, you can't sell it. But like, where would you invest your money right now in your business?
Yes, I think there is a balance, and I think you articulated it pretty well there. I think the somehow theoretical ability to do what Walmart does, and every time a unit sells, I manufacture another unit by pulling it through my entire supply chain. That's almost never going to be realistic for the sub $30 million company. It's just not going to be. And so we are going to have to make investment decisions. We're going to place our hard earned or hard raised working capital into inventory. And I think my point is, I wish that sellers, brand owners would focus more on not all opportunities are made equal. So for instance, so to answer your question directly, I'm focusing on return on inventory investment. I want to know that when I say spend $10 to secure a widget, that I have good return on that investment. So if after my advertising, after my logistics, if I had $5 in profit, that would be a 50% return on that $10 investment that I had to use to place the product to begin with. That is a really important metric, but taken in a vacuum, it just isn't very helpful. I also need to know the IPI number you just mentioned, which is inventory turns. Okay, every time I turn this inventory, again, theoretical example, I spent $10 on the product, I made $5 in profit. I've got a 50% return on inventory investment. But if I only turned it once this year, I only made $5 all year for that $10 that I put into the business. If I can turn it more often, if I can turn it 3 or 4 times, and if you look at FBA, they want it to be 3 or 4 or 5 times a year in terms of velocity. Not only does it make Amazon happy, which frankly, beyond staying off the radar, we don't care about keeping Amazon happy. What we care about is making more money. And so if I can then take that same $5 profit and turn it 4 times a year, I only had to have a single $10 bill in my business, but I've made $20 in profit on it. That's a huge difference.
Where do you think that line should be? So $5 in profit turned 1 time a year versus say $2.50 turned 4 times a year. Which of those worlds do you like better? Just curious.
Yeah, I think as we started looking at the data, I think having inventory turns that are, I'm talking about global inventory, not just an FBA.
Sure.
If it's much more than 4 times a year, it means you're probably leaving opportunity on the table. So I know this is answering a little bit of a different question. So the direct answer to your question is it depends on the strategy. If I'm selling Rolexes, I'm going to have to deal with a higher margin and it's not going to turn as often, but it needs to be coherent with my strategy of selling a high margin, long sales cycle product. If I'm really good at selling Rolexes and I decide to buy whatever the oil that you clean the Rolex with that I need to turn every 30 days to make it a profitable business, I am in danger of not having a coherent strategy. And because I don't have a coherent strategy, I might lose. And so the answer to your question is I got to know what I want. And I need to be consistent in selecting products that deploy my capital in the best way that I can deploy it given my skill set.
So Tyler, you and I go back, I think 3 years now, maybe 4, and you and I both created startups right around the same time. We're both flourishing, high growth, and we have completely different businesses, but we're synergetic, right? Helping out Amazon sellers. So the reason we shot this podcast was we were actually talking about a client and making a conversation between this, profit versus margin situation, or well, I guess it'd be profit versus growth conversation rather. And so this topic, of course, is not just specific to one seller. Like every seller needs this conversation. So take a moment and just tell me, like, what are you seeing at large with your clients as you see their books, you see their numbers, and you're giving CFO advice all day long? What are you seeing? Do people care more about profit or growth right now? And what are they doing about it?
Yeah, I don't. It's good. We probably see all over the board. I mean, to kind of get back to what you said earlier, I think the year that we're leaving right now is going to be a banner year for a lot of sellers, and it's going to be one where they've, maybe like you and I have lost a little hair, right? There's anxiety is high. There's been
it's going. I'm going to join you with the cue ball here pretty quick.
Dude, listen,
I'm thinking
Dollar
about
Shave Club, bro. It'll take care of you. But yeah, so I think that sellers are going to wake up and be like, oh, I've just had the best year ever. This is awesome, and I've been so stressed out. And one of the reasons they've had the best year ever is that they've had some moments where unusual demand for their products has allowed them to capture more margin. They've either been able to raise their prices a little bit, or they've been able to
price gouging. No,
yes, right. Well,
that's what It's what Amazon said, right? And of course, it's completely garbage, right?
It's garbage. It's garbage. Yeah, it's really funny. Amazon can make that argument and then jack up storage fees when they don't have supply anymore. But that's not price gouging, Stephen.
Well, you can't ship your stuff in, and even if you could, we're not going to let you sell it because you price gouge. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, that's right. But we're not gouging you with these fees. Just know that the Q4 storage fees are not gouging. So that's what Bezos needs you to hear. He's also a Dollar Shave Club member, I think. But anyway, so I think the thing that I want sellers to focus on going into the new year is we've got to understand that profit times velocity is more important than either of those variables on their own. So if I'm in a business that turns inventory constantly, I'm selling, but I don't make any money each time I sell it, I'm sad. And if I'm on the other extreme where I'm having huge margins when I sell, but I've got to sit on that inventory for 18 months or 2 years before I can turn it, I'm also sad. And so what I'm looking for is a strategy that allows me to, yes, I'm going to have to buy some inventory, but I don't need 15 months of inventory. Let's buy a few months of inventory, and let's be more responsive to the demand, the behavior of our customers. And I'm going to balance that. And so kind of the example is if I get 50% return on my inventory investment and I can turn that twice a year, well, 50% times 2 is 100%. Okay, that's kind of nice, and so you mentioned this example earlier. If I had 25% return on investment, but I can turn it 4 times, that's also 100% for the year. And so I am financially equally happy with either of them. But where I'm not going to be happy is if I ignore that. If I think I'm making a killing every time I sell a product, only to realize that, oh gosh, I end up writing down a bunch of this inventory because it sits in my warehouse so long that I forget that it was ever the color green, and I destroy all the green ones. And so I just want people to think about velocity and profitability together.
And when we manage advertising for our clients at My Amazon Guy, we constantly are asking for like the pick one metric, right? Because we don't have the ability to go in and like run their books deep down, and we refer out to seller accountant, quite frankly, right? So like if you're a business listening to this and you're looking for somebody to help you understand your financials, Tyler's your guy. I'm telling you. We send all of our accounting questions his way, both from a bookkeeping standpoint as well as like an outsourced CFO. So major plug to Tyler, well earned. And literally the best people surround themselves around Tyler, and he's got a good group of people over there.
Thanks, buddy.
You mentioned color variations. So quick thought that occurred to me. When do you decide to open up your next product launch, right? Do you launch another 2 colors in your variation, or do you diversify your portfolio and add a second or a third product? I have a strong opinion on this one. What's yours?
Well, I'm going to give you mine, and I can't wait to hear yours. So here, I'm giving this opinion as a guy I think I've talked to 12 of these aggregator funds in the last 6 months. So in other words, this is kind of coming from the CFO, what drives enterprise value if I'm trying to exit down the line. And I think what's most important is to have a coherent strategy. And I know I keep like saying that same thing, but having 75 totally different products is not as valuable in the market as having 10 really, really well put together products that are moving. But I would love to hear.
It's also easier to manage a smaller portfolio, I might add.
Yeah.
But keep going.
Well, so on the one side of the fence, if I can build a brand that I can accomplish in 20 SKUs or 20 variants, what it's taking some of the apparel companies to accomplish with 5,000 variants, I'm going to clearly choose the 20 focused, high velocity, high moving SKUs. And I'm going to even err on the side of maybe I just pick one color of green instead of like forest green, jungle green. And maybe I just pick one, like that's going to be me. But of course,
there's only one green.
Yeah, there's only a green, and you either take it or leave it, baby. So that's going to be where I'm going to come from in that. Having said that, if I've conquered a funnel with one product and I only have one size and I can do a single variant that allows me to capture more market, again, it just depends on the strategy. I'd love to hear your thoughts here. Like, what are you coaching your clients on this?
I think it's always better to open up a new complementary product, because I've seen so many brands that launch colors 2 through 10, yeah, and their top line on that parentage is static. Mm-hmm. But if they had launched product 2 or 3 complementary products, their top line skyrockets. So adding the color variations adds the complexity, right, and without necessarily the benefits. So I'm a proponent of that. Also, Amazon has really cracked down on parentage this year. Very difficult to maintain parentage. Also hard to keep up with their transparency, lack thereof, rather, on like what the parentage rules are. So like I have, just use Momster, which is my side hustle brand. I always use it for examples. I sold multiple decanters. Well, the size difference or the shape difference was no longer a valid parentage according to Amazon, and they broke that up. And so like my past strategy was always like, hey, I'm going to always carry certain variations. I'll bring in some of these sub variations during the holidays and whatnot. And that strategy kind of went out the door, right? Like it's very difficult to manage it like that. So that's my perspective, but I guarantee no matter what you and I talk about today, there's going to be thousands of exceptions to every general best practice we give.
And maybe the other thing to say to this is I think because of the nature of our Amazon businesses, if that is a primary channel for us, you just got to not call it your baby. You need to use the 80-20 principle. So if you're going to do the color variations 2 through 10, measure it for 90 days and kill the 8 that aren't working. I think that's the part that a lot of brand owners fail to do is they say, well, I've launched the green one now. I can't unlaunch it. It's there. No, you can unlaunch it. You can actually close that listing down and you can not purchase another run of it and you can liquidate the material because I guess if extending your current line helps you discover the 20% that actually makes you money, cool. And that might be the one exception where you would try it. You just need to have the wisdom to cut bait if it's not working.
I think that what you're describing on this podcast today is the necessity for the vision and strategy should outweigh the day-to-day tactical. And it's very difficult to get away from that day-to-day tactical. So let's talk a little bit about like how you could coach our listeners into that a little bit. So let's have 2 conversations. First conversation, you're coaching as if this is the only conversation they're ever going to have with you. And you're like, how do I start? How do I coach myself conversation? And then let's evolve that to part 2, why you'd want to bring in an outsider to have that conversation. So if I'm just getting started and I recognize the problem, I've listened to the podcast, I know I need to have a better strategy. Where do I start?
For me, it all starts with customers. Like sometimes I think we overthink and overcomplicate it. Who is my customer? Who do I actually solve a problem for? And what does he or she, often in the e-commerce world, what does she actually need me to deliver to her? And then I want to, and you've done this great for some of our joint clients over the last couple of years, Stephen, is just, I'm going to have a very focused test. It can't just be a single product. Normally I have to try a few things, but I'm going to decide from day one, here's who I serve and here's the problem I want to solve. And then I might have to pivot. I might have gotten it wrong, but I'm going to have a focused strategy. And here's the reason that strategy is, again, so important is if my strategy is going to require me to get customers that'll pay me for recurring services or recurring like consumables, I'm thinking about like supplements here. I need to know
hardest category ever.
Super hard category. If you can break
high margin.
That's right. You can get the margins and it's evergreen, right? I'm going to pay a ton of money to acquire this customer, but I'm okay with that because I understand the vision is to keep them forever.
Their lifetime value is way significantly higher than an average regular non-supplement product.
That's right. And so that's a great example of why the strategy is so important. I might look at my ACOS or my tacos for the first year and be like, oh my gosh, I've spent so much money on advertising. And I might be totally happy with that because of my understanding of the lifetime value that I'm building. But in most categories, Stephen, as you know, it doesn't work like that. In most categories, I've got to balance profitability a lot earlier in the product phase. And so I just have to know that my strategy, I'm not going to give myself permission to spend 50% of my budget on ads unless I'm selling a consumable supplement that's going to give me long-term lifetime value. Maybe that's the point.
I totally agree with you. And by the way, grocery, #1 fastest growing category in Amazon right now. According to recent data I read, we saw clothing and beauty take a 30% hit year over year, but groceries up more than 30% even today, right? Like, so post-COVID, whatever. So yeah, it's interesting to see that. Okay. So step 1, basically you're articulating is just recognize what your goal is. Okay. So I think that step is fairly easy, right? Like the hard part is like, okay, well now what am I going to do about it? Right. Like, it's easy for me to say, okay, I know that my lifetime value is higher. I'm going to spend more on ads. That seems pretty easy to do. But step 2, then I've recognized what I want to do. Now, where does that affect how does that start affecting my decision making?
Yeah, I think the maybe step 1B is what am I good at? So I know what I want, and then I have to have an honest discussion with myself to say what am I actually good at? If I'm a I've got product designers that we serve that I'm thinking of a guy right now that sold 1,200,000 of his product before he even placed his first order because he uniquely designed something, was able to use Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and just sold a bunch of product. He doesn't need to be worrying about anything else except designing products that he can sell $1 million of before he does anything else, right? But I have other guys that if their core competency is logistics, they need to focus on that. And so I think that's the second part of it is what do I want? And then what am I great at? And I got to let somebody else do almost everything else as quickly as I possibly can. And I've got to focus on what's going to generate value instead of trying to do everything for long. I can do everything for a few minutes, but I can't do it for long.
That's a good point, right? Like if you continue to juggle balls, at some point you will purposely or accidentally have to drop some of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, in my opinion, every business ever has to do three things and needs to do one of them exceptionally well to survive, and just pass on the other two. C's get degrees at the very least, and
Right.
that's finance, operations, and marketing. And typically speaking, most of our clientele come in and they're good at operations. They've sourced a product, they know how to do product dev, whatever. And then we fill in the marketing arm, and then we ship them out to you for the financial.
There we go.
So that's generally how it works in my mind. All right, so focusing where you spend your time on, because the fastest way to grow an Amazon account, I think, makes perfect sense to me, right? It's to add more products, add more SKUs, source more product. And so for those out there that are really good at that, keep doing it, keep doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. And I think just the focus on whatever you want, using whatever your greatest tools are to get you there. And then, the magic happens, by the way, if you focus on great profitable products, and if you happen to be great at the parts that help those products move on Amazon, you're going to have some cash flow that's going to allow you to invest in other products. And so or you're going to wake up 6 months in and realize, oh gosh, I've maxed out every credit card I have. 2 of my 5 launches didn't work out, and I'm only making a tiny profit margin on the other ones. I'm dead.
Okay. So you just, that comment about the credit cards just really hit home, because I have at least 2 clients that are in this exact boat. How do you get out of that situation? Like, how do you turn things around? Like, what do you do when, oh crap, I made some mistakes?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to remember is that adding money to any business is only going to magnify or amplify what you're doing. So if you have products with great margins and a great path to getting a customer to buy you, adding cash, whether it's a loan or an investor, even a credit card, could be a really great decision. But if you don't, if I'm like, oh, maybe then I'll someday have some margin once I add another 100 grand in debt, that is a really, really bad, disastrous business strategy. So let's say that you found yourself, I got a couple of $50,000 credit cards that are maxed out. I'm in trouble. The first thing I would do is I would want to see, is there any money in my supply chain that I can get free? In other words, do I have some dead inventory I can liquidate or get off my balance sheet? Do I have any options to go refinance that loan using a more traditional bank, not credit card loan? And then the third thing I would look at is, are there any expenses? Is there a Netflix account for $12 on my P&L that needs to not be there? Am I paying for 17 Amazon integration tools when I'm only actually using 2? Those are probably the first 3 things I would do. Is I've got to try to get rid of inventory that's bad. I've got to try to refinance debt if I can. I've got to get rid of extra expenses.
So let's say it is like, I don't know, 30% of what you would expect in your annual profits is in debt right now. How quickly does that turn around based on subscribing to what you're mentioning? Is this a 30-day turnaround? Is this a 6-month-day turnaround?
Well, and I think this is back to the topic of this podcast, which is it depends on how rapidly you're growing, right? So that's the other thing that you may have to do, is you may have to pull back the reins a little bit, slow down the growth of your company so that as you get profit from selling the goods, you're not immediately funneling it into future inventory. You may have to slow the puppy down a little bit to say, I've got to right the ship. I've got to get this high interest debt off my balance sheet. And so it's, I don't know how to make that a math problem, but it might only be a couple of months if you're like, okay, I'm not going to assume I'm going to double again next month. Let me just chill for a minute and get healthy. Versus if I say, no, I'm going to double down. I'm going to take as much debt as I can. I'm going to try to triple my business in the next 6 months. Well, you're not going to pay down your debt while you're tripling. It's just not going to happen. And so I just think that's the inverse relationship between velocity and profit.
I think the phrase I would use to summarize your comments here, it's discipline,
Yeah.
right? Like you gotta discipline to that strategy. So let's go into that second part of that. Bringing in an outsider. Why should somebody bring in an outsider to help them talk through these problems?
Well, it's because of what we just said. You're great at some things. You got a superpower, maybe two. You're not going to have more than two. You're going to be great at some things and terrible at some other things. Those three core functions of the business: marketing, ops, and finance. Like you said, you're going to be pretty good at one and terrible at one, and meh at the third, right?
C's
And
get
so
degrees at the very least needed.
yeah, at best case scenario. So for the things that you are weak at that can kill you, you need to get help yesterday, right? So this is like, for instance, we don't do taxes at Seller Accountant, but if taxes can get you put in jail, if you don't understand taxes, you need a tax guy last week. You should have gotten one to begin with, But taking that illustration a little bit further, if I'm not great at marketing and I want my business to grow and it's going to have to grow by marketing, I need to get my Amazon guy, I need to get some marketing juice in the business early on. Same thing with accounting. I'm personally am an advocate for waiting a few more months for the kind of accounting that my team does. I don't want to be a brand new startup with 10K a month of revenue trying to bring on a bookkeeping team. That doesn't make any sense.
No, of course not.
But once I get above a certain threshold and I really want to understand how to maximize that annual return on my investment, I need to bring on a team that knows how to do it. And I would hope that the team does it for a lot of customers that look just like me, instead of me being, and this is why I would shy away even on the accounting stuff from just hiring your CPA accounting tax guy to do your books. He's never seen Amazon before, and he frankly hates it even more than you do.
It's different. Why do I have to do all these things differently for this thing over here? Well,
Yeah.
This is exactly why we're having this conversation, right?
That's right.
Okay, so like walk me through this. What's the first one or two things you do when you take on a client that's struggling and you're trying to correct the ship? What do you do?
So step one is basically visibility. What normally we realize is, you kind of imagine the car illustration, there's normally mud on the windshield. We can't see what's happening. And so creating accrual basis books.
Mud on the windshield. I'm writing that one down.
Yeah. Most business owners who are stressed out about finances don't know where their money is going. And so step one is just to know where your money's going. And you've seen this with some of your clients also. I mean, how often is it that you pick up a catalog and you realize that 2 or 3 of the ASINs are killing them because they're spending like 70% of the budget on advertising, right? I mean, we see those things too, where we're like, hey, how much did you think you were spending on this one product? Well, $5. Well, it's $30. Oh my gosh. And so it gives them that intelligence to make low hanging fruit changes, right? So you got to get the mud off the windshield. Once you can see things, you may have to make a sharp turn out of the ditch, right? and then you just gives you power to make better decisions. I mean, the reality is that everybody wants to get paid. And so if you have to go back to your supplier and say, hey, I just brought on a new accounting team and I realized I'm getting crushed, I need to get on a payment plan with you, but I'm going to try to make this right. 9 and 10 of those suppliers are going to work with you because they don't want you to die, right? And so I just think knowing what's happening and then actually having hard conversations with yourself, you're the decision maker, and then with your vendors and team can make a big difference. And a lot of times you realize, like, wow, I was like sending out $100 bonuses to everybody who got anywhere close to me in the last 6 months. And I bought 17 different of this. And you kind of go back to the discipline number. I didn't have enough. I thought I had money to do that because Amazon was making these large deposits. And what I forgot was that bill for my large inventory order was going to come due. And so it's just good to get clear, force yourself as a highly optimistic entrepreneur type, which is honestly you and me, Stephen, to face the numbers and say, oh, I can do this. I can't do that. That kind of thing.
How often should somebody be looking at their own financials?
Man,
realistic answer, because daily is the right answer, but yes, like realistic answer.
Financial data needs to be a part of your daily routine as a business owner. It does. But I would argue that your accounting system may not be the right.
I think we lost him for a second. All right, we lost Tyler there for a moment. I just hit resume on the recording here. All right, so Tyler, what's something I could do that takes 5 minutes today to better improve my own financial outlook?
Yeah, and so we were just talking about it. So make sure you have some system to look at your numbers every day. There's a daily review of some kind of financial data. And, if I had 5 minutes today and I had no idea, I've just been grabbing the 14-day deposits from Amazon and that's all I've got. Man, I'm gonna stop right now and go find a tool. Helium 10, Celix, pick one that you like, integrate that sucker with Amazon, and make sure that you understand what your unit economics are. When I sell widget A, I'm happy or I'm sad.
Make sure every expense is documented. Cost of goods, ads costs, anything in Seller Central can be exported by a tool. Make sure you manually input anything that's not in Seller Central yourself and put it into the cost of goods in one way, shape, or form. All right, great advice. So the last question I have for you, I get two last questions. So let's talk about what you think predictions are going to happen next year and why, on Amazon at large, could be financial or whatever. And then anything else that I haven't asked you that you think is just good wisdom you want to share today. Go ahead.
Well, I think 2021 is going to continue to be a great year to be an Amazon seller. There's never been more smart money in the space. Values are up. But I think a piece of advice I would give sellers that are getting that weekly email from some kind of an aggregator fund to buy them is don't do anything out of fear. I think some of the aggregators out there are saying, hey, here's your once in a lifetime opportunity. You got to sell now. I would say be patient, know what you want from your company, and don't feel like you need to settle.
I think Amazon businesses are going to go up in value next year. What percentage would you say, if you agree with me, what do you think they're going to go up in value percentage-wise next year?
I think we'll see I think 20 to 30% increase in value.
I think 30 to 40. So I think if we meet in the middle at 30, that's probably the realistic number then.
Yeah. Which means if somebody makes you a cash offer today that isn't 30% above what you wanted, right, or right at your target number,
might be time to hold.
You need to say a hard no. Let's keep executing, keep doing our thing, keep doing it. And then the other just piece that you said, a piece of anecdote or piece of advice is if you take your profit number after ads and divide that number by your COGS, that's how you get that return on inventory investment. What was my profit divided by what it cost me to secure the product? And I just want you to start keeping an eye on that. You may not know what to do about it until you track it for a few weeks or a few months, but just know that that's a really important metric for understanding how effective you are at taking $1 of working capital, buying inventory, and actually making money on that inventory. And so just start a Google sheet and just do it. Just keep up with it for a few months and see what happens.
Well, good words of wisdom from you today, Tyler. If anybody wants to get in touch with either you or Seller Accountant, where should they go?
Yeah, come visit us at selleraccountant.com. Contact form, everything you need is there. We'd love to talk to you if you're looking for help.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the My Amazon Guy podcast. This is not the first time you've been on and will not be the last. We love talking with you. Thanks so much, Tyler.
You got it, buddy. Always my pleasure.
This was the My Amazon Guy podcast with Stephen Pope. Each episode helps you grow your sales on Amazon through ideas on traffic and conversion rate improvements. Hit that subscribe button right now to tune in each week. And if you need more help, go to myamazonguy.com.